Well, this is exciting. We're going to be going live here in 36 seconds. Ooh, somebody just joined on Instagram, I think. We'll wait 1 minute and then we'll get going as I have everything set up in the other platforms to start at 12:30. So welcome everyone. I know Fridays are probably the craziest days to do anything, but I appreciate anybody who's tuning in to this session. And let's see when it goes live. Carlitos, love seeing you there, Carlos. Okay. All right, let's wait. We'll wait 1 more minute and then we should be going live in our other platforms. This is the first time that I'm using the StreamYard platform to really stream across different areas. So we'll see how it goes, but it's 12:30. I assume we have gone live in all of our other platforms as well. And if not, this is being recorded, so I'll just post it after. Thank you for anybody who is joining and being part of this masterclass, I would call it. And then we'll just get going. I know that somebody was telling me when we do live streams, I need to give it a little bit of time until people joins and start seeing the notes that it's time to join the session. But we are going to get going because I have some very good stuff to go through today. We're going to be diving deeper into some of the issues we are seeing in regards to invisible labor and how do they actually impact the workforce. And I am going to maybe ask my people who is here if they can see me. I'm hoping that they can. Maybe some comments in there. Yes, no. I'm guessing yes. Well, we'll get going. I appreciate everybody today. I know it's Friday, so it's a little bit of a hit or miss when it comes to spending the time here with me, but I appreciate you for joining me. Today is going to be actually my very first live session where I'm actually educating and spending some time explaining something and going deeper into it. So I'm very thrilled that you were able to be here, whether you're tuning in on Instagram, YouTube, or LinkedIn. I appreciate you. For those of you that don't know me, and I think some of you do, but if you don't, my name is Naili Russo. I am a leadership consultant and success coach, and I am on a mission to really empower professionals. I do focus a lot on women and minorities, but professionals in general to help them potentially fast track their career and honestly start earning what they deserve and succeed in whatever way success looks like for them. So my journey started in Venezuela. I actually have some of my Venezuelan friends. I can see them. And through my journey, I have faced a ton of challenges, right? And through those, starting new in a new country and having to break through a ton of glass ceilings and working in some very male-dominated industries. And it wasn't easy, right? But through all of that, we learn. And one of the things that I learned that I think it's critical that I share here with all of you is that success is not just about working hard. It's about being very strategic about what you're doing and understanding your own value, but also, most importantly, making sure that your work is visible and recognized. So today's topic, of course, is going to be diving deeper into that concept. And it's something that I take very personally because I have lived it. And we're going to talk about the invisible work that so many women are asked to do in the workplace. And these are tasks that often go unnoticed and unrewarded. And they take a lot of our time, and they take a lot of our energy. And so we're going to talk about what that looks like and what can you do in order to deal with this. So this is what we call office housework tasks. and they really keep us stuck and they stop us from advancing in our careers. So before we dive in, I want to take a moment and ask you to think about your own experience, perhaps with this type of task. Have you been asked to take on tasks that just didn't align with the career goals that you have? Or maybe it was planning an event, taking notes, or managing teams' emotions. How did that make you feel? And so today we are definitely going to dive deeper into those as you're thinking about what they are and the impact that they can have in your career, but most importantly, how you can break free from this cycle. And I definitely want to remind you that, if I could go from being an overlooked third child in a very small town in Venezuela to the vice president of people and strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates, a Major League Baseball team here in the United States, then I'm pretty sure that you can do anything you want and you can absolutely reclaim your career and make your work visible and valuable. So we're going to get started on our topic today. The first thing I want to do is that I want to acknowledge the reality of this invisible assignments or housework assignments. Research shows us that women are more likely than men to be asked to do what's known as office housework. And that would include tasks like planning events, mentoring new hires, taking notes during meetings, ordering lunch, or even sometimes managing team meeting agendas. And while these tasks are necessary for the functioning of the workplace, they actually go unnoticed and very much unrewarded, which is probably the worst thing that can happen. And over time, all of these tasks can lead to burnout, frustration, and a sense that you are stuck in your career. And probably the worst part of all of this is that these tasks, while they are very time consuming and energy consuming, rarely, if ever, lead to promotions or to any sort of pay increases. So let me paint a picture for you, right? Imagine that you are in a meeting and the team leader needs something or somebody to take notes, right? You're going through the meeting and the team leader says, okay, who is going to take notes? And without really thinking about it, they ask you. Why? Well, I could say maybe because you're detail oriented, you're very organized, and you're reliable. And this might seem like a compliment. I oftentimes hear the women I coach or the people I coach say, well, they rely on me and that's a good thing. But over time, this complementary task can really become a burden. Or maybe, you are asked to organize the office holiday party again because maybe you do it well. Everybody has a great time. You're an extrovert and, everybody really enjoys the parties that you throw. But what's the outcome here? Does that get you any closer to your next promotion? Does that show them that you are leadership potential or that you actually can take on that next step in your career? Does it put you in line for a pay increase? I would argue probably not. And I have seen it from experience that rarely are those things considered when we're having conversations about promotability or potential pay increases. So the impact of consistently being assigned this task is significant and we often underestimate them. The first thing is that it can lead to burnout. Okay, you're spending time and energy on tasks that just don't align with your career goals. And that would leave you with less time to focus on work that actually matters for your advancement, or even worse, work that actually matters for the advancement of the team, the career, and your leader. Second is that it can create a cycle where you're seen as a reliable team member, but not necessarily as a leader or someone that is ready for a promotion. And third, it can actually erode your confidence. You might start to question your value. Why aren't you being asked to lead major projects or to contribute to strategic decisions that are happening in the department? Why am I the one who is always organizing lunch or running team meetings and agendas? That adds zero value to your learning and to your progression. Another type of invisible labor that's often overlooked is what we call emotional labor. And emotional labor involves managing other people's emotions, obviously, but also being there to provide support and often acting as what I call the office therapist. And what happens here is that, unfortunately, women are frequently expected to take on this role. And whether it is soothing tensions between colleagues or being the go-to person for venting or ensuring that everyone feels heard and valued. Emotional labor can be exhausting. okay? Especially when it's not part of your official job description. It's draining because it really requires constant emotional regulation, empathy, and a lot of your energy, all without any formal acknowledgement or compensation. I do want to mention here too that emotional labor often gets placed as well in minority groups. And this looks in the form of any sort of like D&I committees or any sort of conversation that they want to have around cultural awareness. We tend to lean into the groups that are in the minority group to ask them to help us solve the problems for the organization. And that puts a lot of pressure on us. And it also creates a lot of emotional burden that ends up impacting us everywhere else in our work. Okay. Additionally, I want to say that this type of labor often unfortunately perpetuates gender stereotypes because women are expected for some reason to be nurturing and empathetic. So they are often seen as better suited for this type of work, which could be farther from the truth, but we expect them just to do this very well. And this assumption can then pigeonhole women into roles that don't advance their career and that keep them from taking on more strategic or highly visible tasks that could lead to promotions or, of course, pay increases. Okay. So we have talked about housework, office work, or office housework, I call it, and emotional labor, and really how they have a significant impact on your career progression. But the good news is that you can actually break free from this cycle if you already find yourself taking some of these things. If not, you can prevent them from happening as well. So the first step, if you want to break free from constantly doing this type of work, is that you need to be aware. You need awareness. I need you to recognize when you're being asked to take on tasks that don't align with your goals. Okay. I want you to start keeping a diary, maybe a journal where you actually write down all the tasks that you are being asked to complete, especially those that don't move you closer to your career objectives. So if you're in a meeting and they ask you to take notes, of course, you don't want to be maybe insubordinate and said, no, I'm not going to take notes. But you can actually, okay, you write it down in your little journal and you keep tabs, okay? And then at the end of the week, of each week, I want you to review your entries. Are there patterns that you're seeing? Okay, this will help you become more conscious on when you are being pulled into invisible work. Once you are aware, you have to set boundaries, okay? It's perfectly okay to say no. Time and place, but it is okay to say no, especially if that task is not part of your job description, it's constantly being asked of you to complete, and it doesn't advance your career forward, okay? So here is a tip that I want to give you on how to set boundaries. Before you agree to take on any new task, I want you to practice saying, let me check my priorities first. I'll get back to you. That is just a good way for you to pause. It buys you time so you can assess whether the task is something that aligns with your goals or that you can reframe, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it also gives you space to politely decline if it doesn't align with your priorities. Okay? So it's something that you can start practicing right now and say, you know what, let me check with my priorities to make sure that I can commit the time necessary to complete this task. One of the ways I always say is that, hey, I don't want to do something poorly, so I want to make sure that I have the time. If you do realize that it just doesn't fit or you're very busy, one of the things I always do is that I used to go back to my boss and say, hey, here are all the priorities I have. Which ones do you want me to drop in order to do this thing that now you're asking me to do? Okay. It's just a very good way to say, I'm not saying no because I don't want to help. I'm saying no because truly I can't take it right now. Now, if you do try to set boundaries, or if you notice that despite all of your effort, certain tasks are constantly falling on your plate, I do think that you need to ensure that you're addressing it. Now, I hear a lot of my women say like, oh, it's not a big deal. It's just, it's just meeting notes, or I love throwing the party anyway, and nobody can do it the way I do. Well, when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else, and you could be saying no to a project that has bigger impact for you. So if you have to address it, one of the things that you can do is that maybe during your team meeting or with your boss, you propose a discussion on task distribution. And what I want you to do is that I want you to frame this as an opportunity to build a more collaborative environment. I want you to suggest perhaps a rotation schedule, okay, for recurrent tasks. And you want to highlight how it benefits every person involved, okay? So it's a very good thing to say, hey, I want to make sure that we have a rotation because I feel the rest of the team, or maybe you say, I think the rest of the team can definitely benefit from gaining experience on how to take notes and how to program manage, on how to throw these events, because it requires a lot of coordination. So you always want to position it that way. And I saw a comment here that says, tell us how can you not do the things that your bosses ask you to do? That's a very interesting thing. And I think that I'm not saying that you don't have to do that, but I'm saying that you have to be careful on what you're agreeing to do. And if they're constantly being asked of you and they're not in your job description, then you need to address it. Okay? Because that's what we call a scope creeps. And then at the end of the year, you find yourself doing a ton of stuff that are not getting you or moving you forward at all. So while I'm not telling you to tell them no, but you do want to manage up. Manage up is a significant piece of anybody's career, and we have to learn to do it effectively, right? And that means that we're going to have a conversation about certain tasks that perhaps are disproportionately given to us and not to the rest of the team. Now, if that's part of your job description because you're an executive assistant or you're a chief of staff and the expectation is for you to do those things, then absolutely you should do them. But if they're not part of your role and there should be somebody else's task, or perhaps it should be a team effort, then you need to clearly articulate that. And I hope that helps. Okay. Now, here is the thing. I think it's very important that you are highlighting how this is going to help the team and how it's going to promote fairness. Okay. It's all about saying, hey, all of us should be contributing equally to the team. And I want to make sure that I'm not the only person who is given this task all the time. Now, sometimes the hardest part is actually resisting the urge to volunteer, especially when no one is stepping up. You have to resist that urge. Okay, when the room goes silent and you feel the urge to take on that task, I want you to take a deep breath and count to 5. Use that pause to remind yourself of your bigger goals. Okay, silence can be very powerful. Don't rush to fill it. Okay, you need to let others step up if needed. And you have to ensure that you're not always the one who is raising your hand to take all of these things that are adding to your plate and taking you away from other opportunities. Okay, now the next step is, how do you handle emotional labor at work? Which, by the way, that can be incredibly tricky because that's a little bit less tangible. Sometimes we just like to be the go-to person, or your colleagues are coming to you a lot and you like to do that. The problem is that rarely being somebody else's emotional support, it's something that you can leave in the office. You do take it with you, right? And it's going to end up impacting you. You're having to practice a lot of emotional regulations. You have to spend a lot of time trying to ensure that everybody feels supported and listened and heard. And then you can put yourself last. I see this a lot on my supported archetypes, or if you are into this, right, my S's in the DISC profile, they tend to take on a lot, right? They'll listen, they'll be there for people. They love to be a supportive system for the rest, but they leave themselves behind, okay? And you have to remember that while that is absolutely critical and you will be loved and appreciated for it, that takes you away from some of your job responsibilities. I don't know about you, but I've never been in a situation where somebody walks into my office and told me, do you have 5 minutes? I want to vent. And it's only 5 minutes. No. Okay. And so you have to really be careful if that's happening a little too often. To help you here, what I want you to do is that you can develop or practice maybe some phrases that helps the person go to somebody that has a little bit more support than you can give them, right? So maybe like, hey, listen, I'm happy to listen, but I think that you need to address this with our supervisor. Or really, I really think that HR might be able to provide more support for you on this than I can give you, okay? If this is a recurrent pattern, I think it's okay to redirect them to the individuals that can help them solve for those problems. Now, sometimes people just need to vent, and that's okay if that's your friend, but this cannot be something that you're doing all the time. I also see it quite frequently. This used to happen to me a lot, where I will be on a one-on-one with my boss, and they will go, "Hey, now, so and so is really having a hard time with the changes that you're making. Do you mind checking on them and just having a conversation to make sure they're okay?" Well, why, right? Like, why do I need to go and do that? And I did it all the time, but now that's an hour and a half of my time that I spent doing that, and happen quite frequently. So just be mindful of that if that is happening. Okay. So make sure that you're practicing some of these things in low stake situations, or even with some of your friends, and that you're redirecting them. Okay. This way you can still offer support, but you're not taking so much just for yourself. Now, if you tried all these things and you were unable to stop getting this task done, or actually getting this task given to you, I want you to ensure that then you're getting recognized for them. And this probably addresses your question as well. So if your boss says, "Hey, I really do need you to do this," and nobody else can do it, okay, perfectly okay. After I had a conversation and I still have to go and get them done, I am going to keep track of them. And you have to make sure that they're being recognized. Okay. So when it's time for your performance review, you bring up the additional work that you've done and how it's contributed to the team's success. You have to make sure that you're creating a wins folder in your email or on your desktop, where you save records of all those extra tasks that you have handled, along with all the positive feedback and all of the outcomes that they drove, and then that you are talking about them with your boss, with your manager, during the performance reviews, in any sort of discussions with your supervisor. Okay. Because here's the thing. Sometimes you can avoid them, right? Sometimes you do want to raise your hand because you want to help out and you want to be of service, but you can let that go to the wayside and nobody knows that you're actually do them. You have to make those invisible work visible. All right. Now, I want to make sure that you're also thinking about how are those things or those tasks that you're taking potentially giving you additional experiences, and how can you position them that way, right? So for example, let's say they ask you to do the team meeting, right? Then you can say, "Okay, fantastic. I'm going to take the lead on these meetings, and I'm going to be running the agenda, and here's how I'm thinking about doing it from a planning perspective." So now you're highlighting your project management skills, you're highlighting your ability to be organized, to keep people on task, to facilitate in the meeting. And those are great skills to learn. And then you're showcasing them and explaining to your boss how you're utilizing them. That way, anything that gets thrown your way, even if it seems mundane, it's now contributing to your career growth. Okay? Now, I want you to remember that all of these strategies that I'm giving you, you have to tailor them to your specific situation. Not everything is the same. There are situations in which, you are jumping in to help. I did this quite frequently early in my career, and it served me very well. But I was very, very intentional about how I was jumping in, who I was helping, how I was helping them get the work done, and then ensuring that that was not invisible, and that I was speaking about it and positioning it for growth. And that I also was reflecting on how it was helping me and how it was helping the organization and my boss. Okay? So make sure that you're spending the time acknowledging what the tasks that you are doing, setting boundaries if you need to, having conversations about potential rotations, framing them in a way that helps you, and understanding what skills are you gaining as you are doing this type of work. Okay. Clarity on where you are going and the things that you are doing is super freeing. And it really gives us permission to set some boundaries and to align with the work that we really, really want to do and that we need to be doing. As long as these tasks are not taking you away from your priorities and the work that you need to be delivering, then that will be perfectly okay. All right. Okay. So I do think that leaders played a significant role here on this type of things happening, by the way, where unfortunately we forget that this type of work should be given equally or equitably in the workforce. I have found myself doing that by accident, actually, a couple of times. And I think the first step for anybody who is tuning in here who happens to be a leader is that you need to recognize that this is an issue. We have to recognize that we sometimes, unfortunately, go to women for certain tasks because we think that they're better at it than the rest of the individuals. And we have to ensure that we're paying close attention to who's being assigned certain tasks and why. Okay. Are women or specific employees consistently being asked to take on roles like note taking, event planning, mentoring? And if so, if you're disproportionately assigning them to them, and that's not part of their job, you need to make sure that you're changing that practice, or that you are actually giving it to everybody across your team, right? So maybe implementing a simple rotation system really helps. Maybe during team meetings, you rotate the responsibility of note taking among all team members, regardless of their position or regardless of their gender, right? This not only ensures that there's fairness, but also helps everyone develop a broader range of skills that they can utilize, right? Leaders should also ensure that tasks are distributed equitably, right? Not just rotation of event planning and note taking and lunch orderings and all of that, but also other key responsibilities and opportunities that would allow your team members to grow and to contribute in different ways. Okay. So maybe during your next team meeting, you propose setting up a rotation or talking about different ways in which everybody can contribute equally. And you create a schedule that will work for everybody where there's shared responsibilities. This will really foster a more collaborative environment and then ensure that everybody gets a chance to develop key skills that are fundamental for their growth. In regards to emotional labor, okay, if you find yourself going to somebody that can give a space, because I think that, and sometimes emotional labor, while it is disproportionately given to women, I think some men who are very good at sort of saving space and staying calm, they take a lot of that emotional labor too. And so if you're a leader, who are you finding yourself that you're burdening certain employees with more emotional labor that is required, I want you to make sure that you're aware, that you're also providing them with some peer support groups, access to maybe professional resources, that your team has a psychological safety space where you encourage everybody to talk, to have a positive work environment. And I think that everybody should be responsible for that culture and for that openness. And I think that the leader sets the tone on how that happens. Okay. I think also there's some training on emotional boundaries and empathy management, which I think is so crucial. And if you have the ability to do that for your team, then do so, because I think it's important for each individual to also understand their own limits and then encouraging them to support one another without taking on so much just for themselves. Okay. Now, often the uneven distribution of tasks can come from unconscious biases and stereotypes. And I think it's very critical that as a leader, you understand that it's vital to address potential root causes that can create certain disproportionate assignment of tasks, and perhaps doing some implicit bias training for all of your leaders and for all of the team members. I think that's a crucial aspect here. Trainings like that also helps even us as leaders, right, recognize our own biases and work towards a more sort of equitable distribution and recognition for all of your team members. Now, I also think it's important to recognize and reward this type of work because it's needed, it's necessary, and it really helps and it moves the needle. And so as long as you're not ignoring it, or you're thinking like, oh, that's just, emotional labor is emotional labor, but that you're taking your time to recognize it, and that you're taking the time to take that invisible work to be visible and how supporting the team, then I think that would help and go a long way. During performance reviews, talk to your team members about that, acknowledge their contributions and the things that maybe may have gone unnoticed, like mentoring or organizing those team events, or even maintaining team morale, or always being the positive person that is keeping everybody motivated and engaged. So consider how those tasks really contribute to the overall success of the organization, and then highlight them as much as you can and ensure that they know that you see them and that you value them. Okay. So I think that as leaders, you have a responsibility here, and you have to make sure that you're creating that balance, and that you're creating some feedback mechanisms where employees can voice their concerns about any potential task distribution, emotional labor, or any other sort of equity issues that can be happening. And regularly reviewing those concerns and then taking action to address them, it really demonstrates a commitment to fairness, to inclusiveness, which is very, very much necessary in order for us to succeed, right? And for all of the workforce to feel that they are a part of everything that you are doing. Okay, leading by example is one of the biggest components of leadership. and remembering that there is an ongoing commitment to this type of efforts really helps. So before we wrap up, I want to encourage you, of course, to take action right now. If you are feeling overwhelmed, but some of this invisible labor or maybe some emotional labor, I want you to start setting boundaries. I know it's difficult. I know that it's hard to think about saying no to something that your boss is giving you, but it's not about saying no. It's about knowing how to address it, how to respond effectively, how to ensure that your well-being as well is taken care of, and that you are also taking on roles and tasks and projects that aligns with where you want to go, right? That are going to take you further along in your career. And so I want to make sure that you are taking the time to reassess and take some action if necessary. And I did not realize this time flew by because it's 30 minutes already, but I appreciate all of you for joining, for the questions that were asked, and I hope that you have a fantastic weekend and a fantastic week ahead. Take care. Bye.